We're very pleased to have as our speakers this evening two people who are well able to tell us about the miners' strike. On my left, Ray Davies, and Ray is a veteran campaigner and county councillor, and as well as that he's the author of A Miner's Life, the 1984 miners' strike and the Rumney Valley Miners Support Group, of which copies are on sale at the back at £6 a time, I should say. There are all kinds of other things being put out on display at the back, but that's among them. So don't forget about that. And he will speak, then we'll have a collection, and then Tyrone, who has, as Ray said, managed to come away from a celebratory dinner so as to be here, will then have an opportunity to speak. Tyrone is are you still the chair of the Guthrie Tower Anthracite
I am.
Limited? He is, and
Not executive chairman,
but owners of Tower Colliery. I'll mention some more about him in a moment or two. So I think without more ado, perhaps Ray needs a time to eat. Somebody kindly put some sweets for the speakers, so Ray is benefiting from that.
Would it be best to ask Tyrone first, because if he's got a dinner he's supposed to be?
No,
I'm not complaining.
the dinner started at 5 o'clock. He's eaten all 7 courses.
And he's suffering from indigestion, but he's here, that's the
So we'll allow him to digest his dinner while Ray addresses us, which I'd like to invite you to do now.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you, Ray.
Well, first of all, thank you sincerely for coming, and to the UNA for having this event, because we had a discussion about it at the UNA, and of course there was an international aspect to the miners' strike, because they came from far and wide across the world, because they just simply couldn't believe how strong and courageous the miners were. And towards the end of the strike, they said that the miners were an inspiration. And the miners from Colombia came, and there was photographed with them outside there. And he didn't want to go home, he wanted to be part of the strike all the time. But he said, I've got to go back home, he said, because I'm going to tell him all about what's happening in Wales, he said, and what's happening in Britain. So the miners' strike did have an international aspect to it. Now, I've listened to a couple of speeches about the miners' strike, but a lot of people have not dwelt on how the miners' strike came about. It didn't just start in April. No, it didn't start in April of '84. It started in 1972, early 72, because the miners went out on strike then for a just pay award. They were very, very low paid at that point in time, and for better safety conditions in the mine. And they went out on strike, and they stayed out on strike. Ted Heath was the Prime Minister, and he swore that he would not allow the miners to win this particular strike because of another capitalist credit crunch was applying at the time. But when he saw how strong the miners were, and I went with my father down to the various picket lines all over the country, and we had an enthusiastic reception wherever we went. He then decided to go to the country when he thought he would win overwhelmingly, whether who's going to run the country, whether it's going to be the miners or whether it's going to be the government and the politicians. And we all know what happened. He was soundly defeated, and it brought a Labour government into power at that point in time. But at that point in time also, there was a woman who was part of Ted Heath's team, and she was absolutely appalled at what had happened. And she got a little think tank together of some right-wing Tories, and they plotted against Ted Heath. They got him kicked out, and they made a plan. First of all, it wasn't just to defeat the miners and the trade unions, but also to dismantle the welfare state. And she knew she couldn't do that because the big obstacle was the trade union movement, which was very strong in the 70s. And of course, her tactics was that she wouldn't go for the miners straight away because she didn't want the same as what Teddy went for. She went through the weak trade unions. She went for British Leyland, Red Robbo, and got them on strike, and right-wing trade union leaders fell at the first hurdle. Then came the steel workers, where I was working. It was Bill Sears. He didn't know what a strike was all about. His deputy phoned me up and asked me, can I get the picket catalogue of the miners for what they got to do. They just didn't know what to do, but they stuck it for 13 weeks, but they also got defeated. Then they took on the public services and on the railway workers and everybody, until they felt that with the defeats of all taking place, they're now going to take on the miners. And of course they had a real suck-in right from the word go. And for me, when I look back on my early days in the colliery, and where I sort of served my apprenticeship with the miners, I was working in a pit where I was just picking shovels, etc. And I started work before I was 14. And when I went down there, first of all, I could hardly pick the shovel up. It was that heavy. And the pick, and after about a month, 6 weeks, we were working with about 5 different miners. Nobody wanted me, simply because a miner at that point in time had to fill 4 drams of his own and another 2 for the boy, and I was the boy, and my contribution was pathetic. I was so ashamed of myself that was happening, and so the overman put me to work with a piece worker, a day worker, not a piece worker, a day worker, and I was with him then for about 8 weeks, and I was working with him, and all the time I was trying to use the shovel and trying to build up my muscles, etc. And eventually I did come good. I went with a miner, a beautiful miner, Fred, his name was, and he wasn't just a miner, but he was a friend. And the education I used to have when we go halfway in, and you're the miners talking about the utopia, you're the miners talking about a different world is coming once we win the election, once we kick the Tories out. And they thought that Churchill was very, very strong, but they felt that we could beat him. And I couldn't, the buzz on my ears, I couldn't believe the things they were talking about: health services, taking control of collieries, taking control of the banks, taking the control. Revolution was in the air all the time. And then they brought some Bevan boys. Then they brought some Bevan boys in. Every 12th conscript during the war that went to work underground. And when they went to work underground, they give them helmets, they give them gloves, and they give them steel-toe cap boots, everything they had. And here was me now, you know, just a young lad, just 14 years of age. My father's soft hat, my grandfather's old trousers, my uncle's soft shoes, and no thought about the boys who were starting work underground. But of course the Bevan boys had to have everything. And so I went up to the mansion. I said, excuse me, I said, why can't I have an helmet? I said, and boots. He said, if you don't bugger off, I'll put my boot behind him. He said, well, get to work, he said, with your miner. So I went to the lodge, brought it up, and I said, what do you want, Ray? What are you bothering about? I said, I want a helmet. I said, steel-toe cap boots. Oh, I said, we all want that. He said, look, he said, we got strikes coming off. He said, sit there and keep quiet. So then I went to an old communist and I said, listen, I said, it's frustrating. I said, I can't get anybody to listen. I says, to the inequality of Bevan boys, adults, I said, and boys, I said, and the difference between them. What can I do? Oh, he said, call a strike. I said, I can't call a strike. Yes, you can, he said. What are you going to do? He said, and Tyrone would know about it. You go up to the lamp room, he said, and when the boys come and get their lamp, he said, tell them it's a strike on. He said, and he said, tell them we're having a meeting up at the canteen. So that's it. So by the Watson, there was about 20 boy miners, of all various ages, and at the canteen we go. So I was there pontificating and saying, we're going to stick out of this strike, I said, until we win. I said, we want equality, I said. Those miners there, I said, they're only on about the money in it, I said, but we're on about our safety. Right, I said, out on strike, up the mountain, playing cowboys and Indians, time of our lives most of us, up there for a week, until my father said, when I come home, I didn't bring my wage home. And he said, have you had a good day of mine today, son? Yes, Dad, not too bad. Oh, I said. So he got me by the ear, dragged me into the kitchen. He said, well, now where's your pay packet? I said, well, I said, I'm going to pay packet. Why haven't you got a pay packet? I said, because I haven't been to work. Why haven't you been to work? I said, because I've been on strike. Oh, you've been on strike, he said. Did you do it through the lodge? No, I didn't. I said, because they wouldn't listen to me. Oh, they wouldn't listen to it. I said, no, he said, you bloody get back to work straight away, he said. And all the other boys' fathers, he said, would be kicking their backsides and getting them off to work. So that was the end of my strike. But I learned the lessons from there, and I learned the lesson from my fathers and the miners all through that particular period. Fred, my lovely miner, got killed. We were both working together. Down came the roof. I got away with a broken shoulder, but he had a big rock on him, and he was killed instantly. And death was never very far, and death is never very far from underground. And people say, well, what the flipping heck are you working there for? But believe you me, I'll tell you this, and I'll tell it to you sincerely. The finest days of my life were spent underground, because there was a comradeship and a feeling down there that I've never experienced anywhere else, whether it's in steelwork or whatever other jobs I went to. They were together, everybody was there together, solid. And even though death and disease and various things wasn't very, very far away, everybody was there for everybody else. And we did defeat the Tories. We did win that 1945 election. We did start taking control of our lives. We brought in the health service. We nationalised the mines, the railways, the commanding knights of the economy, and we set the pattern for the prosperity, I think, of this country throughout the following years. Now, when the miners' strike came along, here was Thatcher straight away. And of course, the lies that came out of it, first of all, and Tyrone will tell you about it, they were saying it's not about closing all these pits that Arthur Scargill was saying. You know, Arthur Scargill is telling lies all the time. We will be closing some pits, yes, he says, but say probably about 40 pits throughout the country, he said, hardly any at all. And about 80,000 miners probably will have voluntary redundancy, he said, but it's not. And the media, like it is today with the sort of Russia-Ukraine thing, was full behind Thatcher, 100% behind Thatcher. And they were sending out their letters saying about lies at Arthur Scargill and what the miners were saying, and the money is there for you and your jobs will be there for you. And believe you me, for the miners to stay out on strike for a 12-month, with all the bills that was being thrown at them left, right and centre, it was a testament to their courage that they stuck out there for that 12 months. And one of the reasons they stuck out there, obviously, as I mentioned, obviously, about the women, but it wasn't just the women, the communities themselves, because in the mining communities those days, everybody was together. And I and about 6 or 7 other people who weren't working down the colliery, we set together our support group. And it was a support group in every mining village throughout South Wales and beyond. And we every night we went and collected food from the houses, collected money from the houses, and a lot of the people who were on benefit, they just gave willingly. And so we had a parcel to give every miner every weekend to assist them, because as you know, Thatcher would not pay the miners any benefit at all, and the benefits for the family were cut to the very, very minimum. And miners were being arrested right throughout the country, jailed, etc., because they always got a trumped up charge against them, not just obstructing, but for riotous behaviour and things like that. And for myself, and probably Tyrone could tell you a little bit more about some of these things, I came down to Cardiff, and I felt that Cardiff, owed a great obligation to the miners. Why? Because I think in the 1700s, I think Cardiff was much smaller than Newport, really speaking. It was just this very, very small town. And it was coal that built Cardiff up to what it is today. So the prosperity of Cardiff came, and so I felt it was necessary to go down there. And so the NUM said, oh, don't go down there. He said, we've given that to somebody else. So I watched down in Cardiff. I saw nobody collecting there at all. So me and 3 miners went down there and we sang Miners Lifeguard, which was there singing out Solidarity Forever. And within an hour I collected £500. The public was 100% with us in Cardiff, 100% with us all the way. And so it was coming up to Christmas time, 1984, and I said to the boys, let's go down there for 2 days. So 2 days before, I said, because we've got to give a bumper party for our kids. Our kids are not going to have a bad Christmas. Our kids are going to have the same good Christmas as everybody else's child, I said. And so that's what we'll do. So down to Cardiff we went, and I was there collecting away outside the St. David's Centre. And all of a sudden I had a tap on the shoulder. He said, what are you doing? I said, what am I doing? I said, I'm collecting for the miners. Oh, he said, where's your permit? So I showed him a permit which I had from the Rumley Valley. He said, that doesn't apply to Cardiff. I said, I know it doesn't apply to Cardiff, I said. You don't have to have a permit, I said, to collect in Cardiff. I said, Cardiff, I said, was built on coal. Look, he said, I'm a retired policeman, and he had his little boy with him. I'm a retired policeman, off-duty policeman, he said. And he said, if you don't stop collecting straight away, he said, you're going to be in dead trouble. Now I said, bugger off, I said, leave me alone, I said, I get on with my work. He said, I'll be back, he said, if you're still here, he said, look out. So all the people were all gathering around watching, and I said, it's the police, I said, the money, I said, is for the children's Christmas party. And in came the £5 notes and the pound notes and the bucket filled up right to the very, 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 very top. And the next thing, hand on my shoulder again, right, he said, you're under arrest. So we were struggling with the bucket. I said, the bloody money's not yours. I said, it belongs to the public. I said, so he wanted to take the bucket off me. So then he sent for the police car. Police car came along, I was bundled in, etc. And and all in court, my son was the solicitor, shouting and bawling at me because there was headlines in the Echo on one page, and the next page was my son set up a new solicitor's practice. He said, Dad, he said, you're an embarrassment, he says, to the whole family. He said, you're always getting into trouble. But anyway, went into court, refused to pay the fine, and so I went home. All the support group came then with the van, took all my furniture, which wasn't very much, really speaking, and they put it all in various places elsewhere. And then it was publicity, me and the dogs trying to sleep in the dog's basket. That was front page of the Echo. And the publicity we gave the miners on just that one incident was just unbelievable. And so the strike went on. And we went through that Christmas of '84. We went past that deadline, which all the miners said we will definitely pass the 6 months, because the 1926 strike was a 6-month strike, and we passed that. And the miners were still strong, right to the very, very end. And even on the eve of when that disastrous vote that took place at the National Executive, the National Union of Mine Workers, the miners in the valleys of South Wales was as strong as ever. And it came out afterwards that the reason that the vote went what it did, was some of the right-wing politicians, particularly in the Labour movement, particularly the Kinnocks of this world, and Ron Davies and a few of them, they wanted to strike them because Kinnock always said you had to have a ballot. Well, as far as the union, the NUM was concerned, they worked strictly to the rules of the National Union of Mine Workers, which wasn't about ballots at all. It was all done by the various area regions the way they've always did it. And there's no doubt about it, the jiggery pokery that went on at that last meeting, And the decision by the executive, I'm not quite sure it was, by 1 or 2 votes, to end the strike. It was such a calamity. And then the lies came forward. Instead of the 40 pits, instead of the sort of 60,000 miners who was going to go, practically every pit in South Britain, every pit in Britain closed as a result of that decision. And there are people in Parliament today, and there's people walking about, like Kim was another, what's his name, or it was reputed that he was going to have a safe Labour seat if some of the South Wales miners voted against the strike. And Kinnock himself has said he'd get the leadership if the strike ended. And they all denied it all at the end of the strike, but Kim Owens did get a safe Labour seat, and Ron Davies did get a seat in the cabinet. And of course Kinnock did become the leader of the party for what good it ever did him, because the public, I think, could see through him at the end. But I tell you this, and I tell you sincerely, that 12-month was the finest 12-month of my life. It really was. The solidarity, not just of the miners, but of the community at large, because they knew what was at stake right from the very, very beginning. That strike for them wasn't about money. It wasn't about conditions underground. It was about defending the jobs, keeping the pits going, because they knew that's what binded the communities together. And if you look today, or I think, when was it? I think it was on Monday, Tuesday, we went up to T Penalta in Rhymney Valley. We got the money people, we got the entrepreneurs coming in, and they wanted to open cast. They wanted to dig a dirty grade hole 60 to 70 metres deep, right in the middle of right in the top end of our valley, and scoop out the coal with all the dust and the fumes and the noise, and what it would do to the industries we've already managed to get up there. They would close down and it would stop others coming in. And of course the communities got together, they knew what was happening, and we was up there, Choir was up there, Deb and Roger Todge at the back, they were up there also, and we had the most fantastic march. It's supposed to be a funeral, but it wasn't a funeral, really speaking. We marched around the council offices telling the council to turn the application down, this, that and the other. It showed that the spirit in the mining communities are still there, ready to fight and defend the jobs that they've got at the moment. Even though there's 50% youth unemployment, they fight to defend the jobs that they got there. So I'll end with that and saying that yes, the dragon may be asleep in certain parts of Wales, but in the valleys of South Wales, it's ready to roar again. And when they do roar, I think Cameron and Cork can look out. You mentioned about the South African miners and the Colombian miners, but if you can remember those far-off days when Mandela was eventually released, preceding that, there was a campaign going right throughout South Africa, and it was led by the miners. It was the South African miners, and the choir themselves thanked the South African miners. Also, they went out on strike, not just about the money and the conditions, but about winning the right to control their own lives. And they always referred back to the strike, the British miners' strike, and the way they stood up. And they were always using the miners' strike as an example of the way to go forward and win their own freedom. And it was the same with the Colombian miners, the same. They came over from Russia, they came over from China, they came over from Cuba.
What about the American women who came over?
I beg your pardon?
The women miners came over from America, didn't they? Right?
They did. Yeah. The ones that came over from Kentucky in particular, they said to me on one of the picket lines, they said, we thought we were militant, he said. We thought we had it all worked out what to do, he said. But he said the story that we will take back to Kentucky and to the mining communities in America, he said, it will be a brilliant story, he said. And I know they sent me copies of their newspapers and their pamphlets, etc. And it was all about the way to stand and fight and the way to win. Because the strikes that they were having probably went on for about a month or perhaps 2 months, etc. But there was not one strike anywhere in the world that anyone could ever remember that went on for that long. And that's why I said to Robin and others, there was this international aspect to the miners' strike. It wasn't just about Britain, it wasn't just about Wales, it wasn't just about a few the pits and the valleys. It was about fighting for freedom for whatever the cause was, whether it was for getting rid of apartheid or getting rid of the dictators in Chile and in El Salvador and in Colombia. What the miners did during that strike did inspire many countless thousands of activists throughout the world, and many of the like in Venezuela, when they got rid of the dictator in Venezuela, when they got rid of Pinochet in Chile, it all stems back to what people, when they were inspired by the courage and the determination of the mining community. So
Thanks again. Now, the extra bit about Tyrone, who'll probably tell us more about his experiences, is that he was National Union of Mine Workers branch secretary at Tower Colliery, played a very active part in the miners' strike, and it was subsequently that the cooperative running Tower Colliery was formed largely through his own initiatives, and he remains connected with that, as we've heard, as chair of the Colliery Tower Anthracite Limited, who are the owners of Tower Colliery. So Tyrone, thank you very much for coming, for leaving a dinner for the sake merely of addressing Cardiff United Nations Association. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Yes, because all these guys who retired, they don't meet each other very often, but they're all over the place. Yeah, we're getting together that night. We cancel all the shows. No one sings or dances, anything. That's all they want to do is talk about each other and remember they're still alive. Because some of them are 92. It's a fantastic night. I brought my speech forward. I always give a talk. I brought my speech forward to the beginning of the meeting tonight. So I want to talk about this, the 60th anniversary of the miners' strike. And although we're all miners, I like them sometimes to realise where we come from. Because all this media hype you get on it, Scarlett's to blame, and Thatcher's not. Scarlett's to blame for everything. I want them to think about that and don't be sucked in 30 years later about the rubbish you see on television. So that was important, but also it's the 20th year that Tower closed and reopened, all in the same year, 94. So it was important for me to say a couple of words on that. So unusually, when I normally speak after the meal, I cheated tonight and I spoke, and as soon as I finished, I had one bit of lamb, and I left. But in saying that, I just think I would have done it for Ray anyway. Ray had done so much for us over the years that once he said to me, "Can you make it time with short notice?" That was it. All else had to go. But I want to talk about the miners' strike. But first of all, about me. My great-grandfather got killed with his 2 sons, Christmas Eve, 1885, Marty Colliery. They go to work, they don't come home. And my grandfather, who was the brother and the son, David Watkins, for years he used to say to me, whenever I go up and say, "Look, Gramp, we're going to somewhere to the school tomorrow," or "Never plan, boy, never plan." Here he was, 80 years of age, and the impact of losing his dad and his 2 brothers had stayed with him, because they had planned to this wonderful Christmas Eve, a family Christmas Eve all together, and all of a sudden they go up in the morning and they don't come home. And that is, of all things, the worst thing that can happen to a wife or a partner. Because the same thing happened to my father, killed in Tower Colliery, 1963. He goes to work and doesn't come home. And my mum always told me, Ty, I never had a chance to say my goodbyes. I never had a chance to say how much I loved him. And that is the tragedy when you were killed in them circumstances. It's terrible to die of anything else. But sometimes a partner has got time to say those little things. And that had a huge effect on my mum. Not only that, I love my dad, he was my hero. We did everything together, right? And it's hard to say, but he left me with one of the most wonderful gifts you could give to anybody. The gift of understanding, of knowing what a widow was going through. When they've lived together all that time, to understand, and a part of my job was looking after widows, retired workmen. And the incredible thing is that a man is totally lost. I found that out. A woman can survive because she's got the stuff around the home. Take the woman from the man and it seems to end. They don't even know how to put their shoes on or tie their laces. It's an incredible thing. But all those things taught me how to deal at times of death with people. And I think it was, in the end, it became an incredible gift to understand the time of looking at the photographs. Do you remember my husband? Of course I do. Do you remember this photograph or that photograph? That hour means so much to them. So that's my background. Fourth generation, we've lost somebody every generation. And I found out this week, I've already got 40% of racemic bronchitis. And I still try to go to the gym twice a week. I had a letter this week saying I've got 10% arthritis in the knees as an industrial disease. And I have 1% urine. So I've cracked it. I've gone past 51% disablement. I mean, it's incredible. And I honestly feel quite fit. There are times when it does things to you you can't explain. Sometimes you can't get out of bed. Or something. I'm in church, right? But I'm a staunch socialist. And I believe Jesus Christ was a socialist, right? I don't think he had a virgin birth, and I don't think he recovered from death. But still, he was out there, I believe, doing certain things. So I can just about live with that. Same as I can live with Mandela, same as I can live with Gandhi. There are exceptional people in life sometimes. So if we come to the miners' strike, because how it happened was incredible. Because, remember, workers had no victories, none at all. Till you come to 1969, when the workers, the miners, in the British coalfield, went out on a minority strike. Tower was included. Out of 30 pits in South Wales, only 11 came out. In the whole of Britain, only 60 pits came out. And we went short of working hours for the surfaceman. Incredibly, on the block, right? But that was the first victory I can remember of working class people. That gave us confidence. What was starting to happen now in the 70s, remember the booming jobs outside? You had Hoovers in Merthyr. You had all these factories, the car factories in Bridgend. And people were drifting from our industry. Because you could get better paid working in the car factory or the biscuit factory up in Merthyr than you could work in the coal mines. And this was having an impact. Now besides us wanting better wages, because we dropped something like 5th in the wages league down to 23rd. And not only that, we were losing our skills. So we went on strike in 72. And we won the vote overwhelmingly, right? You have to have 55% in them days, but we had something like 62%. Do you know why? Because in 1968, the government agreed for parity in the whole of Britain. So every miner was paid the same. For the first time that I could ever remember. Every miner, if you work in Nottingham, Yorkshire, Durham, South Wales, you were paid the same. It started off at all the face workers were paid £18. In Yorkshire, they still paid 21. Then the following year, we went up to 19. And then finally, after 2 years, we all were having £21 for working the coalface. And that united us. So we had the strike in 72, which we won 12 weeks, mind you. 12 weeks on a strike, but we won it. Then we come 74. And Ted Heath, I think in his stupidity, believed. Because I like Ted Heath. He used to give us a percentage rise in our wages every time the cost of living went up 5%, we did a 3% rise. Yeah. Fantastic! I've never done so well. Right? So I didn't want to lose Ted, poor old Ted, but he challenged it. Our wages were falling back, even though with this TED system, right, we're still losing people. So in 74, we had to go back out again to prove our point. And we went out, was it 4 or 5 weeks, something like that? I think it was 7 weeks in Tower, because we all went early in Tower. We always went a week before and come back a week late. But in saying that, that should be done. 10 weeks the country lost the boat with the Labour government in. That was 74. The lessons learned was workers are getting too powerful. And we said this, workers are now very powerful. We can actually change governments. That did never happen in Britain. And in Britain, with the royalty, right, and this democracy, how the hell could workers have any power? They're not supposed to. But here we were in the period of about 7 or 8 years, all of a sudden, workers perceived to actually get rid of governments.